Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rockingham County School Board of April 12th, 2021. Board members, we have to approve the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Any questions or discussion, board members? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries 5-0. We have an agenda for this evening. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We ask that you take a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll move into the public comments section. We have one person signed up for public comment. That's James Seppa. Please join us.
Okay, sure. I'm used to using my teacher voice, so, all right. During the pandemic, the teachers have worked hard to adapt our programs to some untold circumstances. We're skilled at working through the contingencies of life, and rather than try to impose a rigid order over the chaotic events beyond our control, we seek out teachable moments. We look for life lessons that transcend our fields of expertise to provide our students not only with tools enabling them to be productive workers, but also a vision of what it looks like to be a good person, resilient under pressure, kind in adversity, and hopeful throughout times of fear and confusion. The past year has given us innumerable opportunities to innovate. Social distancing made us prioritize what is important over what is familiar. At MTC, teachers identified what is best learned in person versus what can easily be learned at a distance using technology. We redesigned our curriculum according to the priorities we established. Remarkably, many instructors found that what we had originally created as a contingency plan turned out to be more effective educational models than what we were accustomed to prior to the pandemic. I, along with my colleagues, are eager to share the success we've had over the last year. By rethinking the strategies and techniques that we used in our labs and shops, we've created learning environments more conducive to teaching students in the 21st century. A full discussion of these successes will require much more than the 3 minutes I have tonight. I'm here tonight primarily to voice the concerns I share with my colleagues over the apparent exclusion of teachers from the decision-making process regarding our return to school. There has been very limited dialogue about this between teachers and the board directly. We had no chance to share the potential benefits of making the solutions we created in the midst of a pandemic part of the new normal going forward. The lack of teacher involvement in the decision-making process for our return to school will generate consequences that will potentially nullify and even reverse much of the systemic progress we've made. We teachers are servants at heart, and we are super resilient. When the balls fumble, we recover it, and we'll carry the ball across the goal with our students once again, but that does not make it right that we should have to do so when we could have prevented the fumble in the first place. Going forward, we teachers want to be included in the huddle. Our input could make life easier for students, parents, and administrators alike. At this very moment, we have a new set of strategies to add to the playbook. Though it is too late to change our plans for this school year, it is our hope that the board will engage us about our ideas looking ahead in the near future. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for listening. I look forward to meeting with you soon to share the vision of the teachers that I represent tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sackler, for sharing your thoughts with us this evening on behalf of the RCEA. We appreciate it. There is no one else signed up to speak before the board this evening. Is there anyone that wishes to speak before the board? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and move on to board member comments. Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. This evening, I'm happy to say that we are back in school. I'm happy that everybody had a spring break. We had it on the calendar and we were able to fulfill the spring break, and we're happy to have the students back. We're also thrilled about the fact that graduation this year will be held at Bridgeforth Stadium, where many parents and community members are able to come and see our students graduate. And finally, we're in the last 9 weeks of school, and we're hoping that it'll be a great end of the school year. Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Mr. Falk. Thank you, Mr. Falk. Ms. Lohr.
I just want to take a moment to congratulate the Broadway High School Conduct of Meetings team for placing first in the state, and they hopefully will be traveling to Indianapolis for the national convention, hopefully this fall. A lot of hopefuls there, I know. And definitely congratulate Herschel Hoffeditz, Jackie Diaz, and Katie Payne for becoming all-state members, and they will be representing their chapter and Virginia in one of the opening ceremonies at state convention, whatever that looks like in June. So congratulations to those students. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Mr. Breeden.
No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Dr. Scheichel.
I had the chance to spend the morning at Elkton Elementary School today and Elkton Middle School. It was such a joy again to see our staff at work with all our students who wanted to attend in person, and now 4 days a week in the building. Principal, since Barbara Palmer was stuck at an airport in Florida in a thunderstorm last night. So I spent the morning talking to Blair, and she walked me through every classroom, and it was just truly amazing to hear the students talk, the teachers talk, the counselors talk about how happy they are to be together. At Elkton Elementary, they have every morning student highlights, so they pick a student from each grade. And by the end of the school year, every student really will have had a chance to talk on the intercom. And they told me how many of the students, consistently point out that being in school with their friends is one of the highlights of their day. And at the middle school, I talked to Emily Holloway as well, and to the school counselors there. And I didn't have much of a chance to go into classrooms because I had to go back to the elementary school to help a student who had experienced, a friend of hers had experienced a tragedy last night, losing a parent. And so it was a real mix of emotions, but at the middle school as well, the counselors were talking about how many kids just need to be back with them more often. And that was a real highlight. In addition, of course, to all the stuff that goes on every day, our student athletes competing. I know Spotswood cheerleading and many others are still in the postseason volleyball, and Today was the first day of soccer tryout, so of course that's a personal highlight. I got to spend the afternoon, part of the afternoon with 30 student athletes at Spotswood, and so it was a good day overall, and just good to see school back in session, closer to what those schools have experienced in the past. So we're getting there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. The only comment I have to make is that it's just a voice of appreciation for the hard work for our teachers and our building administration and our staff to get us where we are today. Every day we get new guidance and we have to pivot. Cross country is a perfect example. When cross country started their practices, they were running with masks, and by the time those students that were selected to go to state were running, they were running without masks. And so in between those periods, we got a lot of grief from both sides about what the cross-country runners should be doing. But we had a number of all-state students and some who actually won this year in cross-country. And it's just an example of how we've had to pivot and the resilience of our students every time we've had. We hear the feedback that we get and we plot the course the best way that we can, based on that feedback and based on the data that Dr. Scheichel receives and the guidance. So we appreciate that continued walking with us on the path that we hope to get us through this year, and then next year start anew on some new initiatives and put a great deal of the pandemic behind us. So thank you very much. Okay, board members, we're going to move into action items. The first action item is the minutes for the March 22nd, 2021. We also have the minutes for March 23rd, 2021. I would probably entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes at the same time.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Falk.
Sorry. Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Bocock. I probably threw you a curveball. We have the bills, board members, which have been provided to us from Ms. Mast for March, and the mileage. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move that we approve the bills for March as presented.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any questions or discussion on the bills? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries 5-0. Next is a declaration of surplus items. I think Mr. Reed is going to spend a few minutes with us on a couple agenda items.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I do have a number of items here. The first item is declaration of surplus property. Dr. Scheichel, Mrs. Reed, members of the board, I've attached a list of items, surplus items that we'd like to offer, to have declared surplus and offer for sale this spring. I'd like to add to that a little note that says other small items too numerous to mention. But this is basically what we've accumulated at the maintenance complex since our fall auction. We're not going to be going to the schools and gathering at this time. It's just to kind of clean out the warehouse. So I ask for approval to the declaration of these surplus items.
In the past, we've often joked about all the vehicles that are available. I'm not sure if this is commentary on Chevy's long-lasting roadworthiness. There is no Chevy on here on the list, so it's a much shorter list this time, but I do recommend that the board declare this list of surplus items declare it surplus so that it can be auctioned off.
I will also note that this will not take the place of the fall auction. This is just in addition to the fall.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation regarding the declaration of surplus items. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Any questions or discussion, board members? Seeing none, please vote. That motion carries 5-0. You can sell those items, Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Now we're going to go and purchase some with all the money we're going to make, I guess.
Trade.
Dr. Scheichel and Mrs. Reed, the bid for copiers at Elkton Elementary, McGaheysville Elementary, Mountain View Elementary, J. Frank Hilliard Middle School, Montevideo Middle School, and Wilbur Pence Middle School was properly specified and advertised. We had 10 firms that we sent bid packages to, and we had 6 firms that responded with a sealed bid. Attached, you will see that there's a spreadsheet that not only shows the purchase price of the copiers, but the 5-year costs of the copiers that includes the maintenance agreements along with them. Our recommendation is to award the contract to Virginia Business System for 4 copiers at Elkton Elementary, McGaheysville Elementary, Mountain View Elementary, and Wilbur Pence Elementary at $7,509 per copier for RICO. And then for 3 copiers, the one at J. Frank Hilliard, actually the 2 at J. Frank Hilliard and Montevideo Middle School at $10,925 per copy for a total purchase price of $62,811. And you can look at the 5-year attached costs on the sheet, the 5-year costs. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Reed?
Yes. Mr. Reed, you've been doing this for a good while, and it just occurred to me as I was reading over this information, preparing for the meeting, to ask, what effect, if any, do you see the digital conversion and supplying students with a device has on our use of copy machines and copy paper and things?
Well, of course, our last year has been very unusual.
Mm-hmm.
The 5-year cost that we used was based on the previous year's usage. So we kind of eliminated this last year. But prior to this last year, we haven't seen a great deal of change in the amount of copies being made at the schools. But this last year was very unusual. So we didn't take that into account.
Do recommend approval of the copier bid as presented.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation regarding the copiers. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move we follow the superintendent's recommendation to approve the bid for the copier replacements as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any other questions or discussion? I have one question, Steve. So we bid these out individually of our school versus just a package with each of those companies?
Yeah.
Is that because the school needs are all different, or?
Well, we look at historic uses, what their average monthly copier volume is. And from that, we put a spec together that talks about the size of the machine, the number of copies per minute that it's capable of doing, and then list also, the number of copies per month average to base the maintenance agreement on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Any other questions, board members? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Next up is tennis courts resurfacing.
Yes, the bid for the tennis court repair and resurfacing at East Rockingham High School was specified and advertised. We sent the package to 5 firms. We had 2 firms respond with sealed bids. Finley Asphalt for $116,076.81, and then Tennis Courts Incorporated for $159,292.58. Our recommendation is to award the contract to the low bidder, Finley Asphalt Ceiling, in the amount of $116,076.81. I will say that they are acting as the general. They are using American Tennis Courts to actually install the surface, which is a company that we have dealt with before and have had good luck. So they are just acting as the general contractor. Actually, American Tennis Courts will be putting the surface down.
I do recommend approval of the tennis court bid as presented.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation regarding the tennis courts repair and resurfacing at East Rockingham High School. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move that we accept the recommendation for the tennis court resurfacing bids.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Reed, what's the average lifespan of a tennis court surface?
The surface will typically last 7 to 10 years itself. Now, this is a little more than just the surface. We have some issues with the asphalt also. And what we kind of, in our investigation, has found that when the asphalt was put down, there was a cold joint that was applied. And unfortunately, that cold joint goes right down through the center of 2 courts. So we've developed a crack, and we've tried over the last couple of years of doing some patching and doing some fixing of it, and it hasn't worked. So part of this project is not only the resurfacing, putting the surface on, but it's actually milling up asphalt and getting to the point that if we do have a cold joint, it's between courts, so that it won't be affecting the play. We're not taking up all the asphalt. We had a lot of discussion. I didn't feel like it was time to spend $350,000 on these courts. That's usually a 25 to 30 year type expenditure, and we feel like this is going to bring us back to where we need to be in the cycle.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Okay. Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, on to track restoration.
Okay, so the last bid here is for track restoration at Broadway High School and Spotswood High School. We sent it to 5 firms. We had 1 firm respond with a sealed bid. Our recommendation is to award the contract to the low bidder, which again is Finley Asphalt and Sealing, in the amount of $165,258.97 for Broadway High School, and for $381,835.94 for Spotswood High School track, for a total of $547,094.91. Again, those are some really strange numbers, but they do include in that performance bonds. That's why the numbers got all funky. As you can tell, there's many different restorations that you can do to a track. And the one at Broadway High School is a restoration where we are just removing the rubber surface. We're not touching the asphalt. We're not doing anything with the asphalt at Broadway High School. Where the one at Spotswood, we know we have some bad asphalt areas. We also have an issue that's been there since the school was built, where lane 8 is about 4 inches narrower than the other lanes. And we're going to take that, we're going to fix that. So we are replacing asphalt, replacing some base, and then putting new track surface on at Spotswood. We're at Broadway, we're just taking the rubber surface off. And if we find a problem with the asphalt at any locations after we get the rubber off, then we'll have to handle that at that point. But that's the main difference there. We're adding to the width of the track at Spotswood. We're taking care of asphalt problems along with the surface.
I do recommend approval of the track restoration bids at Broadway High School and Spotswood High School as presented by Mr. Reed.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation regarding the track restoration cost at Broadway High School and Spotswood. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move we follow the superintendent's recommendation to approve the bid for track restoration at Broadway and Spotswood.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Reed, sorry. Didn't we just repair the track at Broadway?
The key word there is repair.
Okay.
And we did some repair work trying to get a couple more years out of the surface, which we have. We got, I think, 2 or 3, I think it was probably 3 years ago that we went in and we didn't actually at that point remove any of the surface. We just went in and we patched areas that were bad and then relined the track. Rubber tracks have changed in their philosophy. Years ago, when we first started building rubber tracks, it was common practice to come back in and add layer of rubber on top of it. The companies now won't do that. Well, I say they won't. They will reluctantly do that in trying to add life. And that's kind of what we did at Broadway. We took some areas where we built up just trying to get some more life, and we had some areas that were damaged that we repaired. But this is taking the rubber surface all the way off and starting over from the asphalt up.
And how long do you expect this repair, this is more than a repair, this restoration?
I would hope that we would get 7 to 10 years. Again, that it's all, there's many factors that factor into it. Broadway's track is one that the community does use a lot. If we could just get the community as they're walking for exercise to walk one lane 8 rather than lane 1, that would help because that's less wear and tear on the inside of the track where most of the run is. And you're walking for exercise anyway, so walk on the outside of the track. So. Yes, and yes, the surface itself again is American tennis courts, which does the rubber surface also. Yeah, yeah.
And that track, we had a number the last time.
We had some varying opinions on how to do the French drain that was in the inside of the track and what to cover it with, and yeah.
So this time around,
We're not messing with the French drain. Yeah. Yep, and fixing bad asphalt areas. Yeah.
I know the coaches out there.
No.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Got a lot of work to do. Okay, let's move into information items. We have something
Good evening, Chair Reed, school board members, Dr. Scheichel. Each year, as most of you are aware, our school division submits a local plan for Perkins 5 federal funding for CTE. The state allocates a certain amount to our division based on a formula that takes into account demographics, socioeconomic status, and enrollment in CTE programs. Now, the funds through the Perkins plan are not to be used for instructional consumable items, but rather for programs, equipment, and professional development and initiatives designed to enhance career awareness and strengthen all CTE program areas. Now, I think in your documents, you should have a copy of an executive summary that we prepared that identifies the amounts that we want to spend in the budget, along with assurances that we have to guarantee in order to accept the federal funds. The detailed budget goes through each of the items I just talked about and has to be allocated in a way that meets the specific requirements of those that we assure them through our plan. Now, you're also going to find in there a performance assessment of how we did last year in CTE programs. The one area that we didn't do as well as we would have liked to is non-traditional enrollment. That's an area we typically have some problems in. And basically what that means is that we don't attract enough maybe females into traditionally male programs and enough males into traditionally female programs. And we're working on that. So part of our funds are allocated for that purpose also. The budget that you have is based on the expected allocation of $155,299.70, which is level funding compared to last year. I do expect a little increase. We won't know the final allocation until the very end of this month when the plans due, but we base our plan on what we expect at this time. And again, this is for information for you tonight. So hopefully by next week, we'll have the exact, or 2 weeks, we'll have the exact allocation. Any additional funds or any reduction of funds would be reflected in the upgrade and modernization of CTE equipment and that line item that's in the budget. Again, tonight, I just bring this to you for information so that you can review it. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to ask you for an approval. Do you have any questions?
Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Fitzgerald at this time? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, in your packet for this evening, you have the financial review for March. You also have information regarding the Virginia School Law Conference on June 4th, which I believe is virtual. Is that correct, Ms. Bocock? If you'd like to register for that, Ms. Bocock would be happy to help you do that. Also on your desk, I left you a new copy of the Key Work of School Boards Guidebook. This year, particularly the last 12 to 18 months, we haven't had a chance to do much professional development as a board. So this edition just came out in late fall, early winter, and I thought maybe you'd appreciate a copy. So thank you, Ms. Bocock, for ordering those for the board. We'll move on to school board questions. Mr. Breeden.
No comment.
Thank you. Ms. Lohr?
I'm debating whether I should ask this question. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So one of my children came home from their first Monday in school in quite some time and said, "So are you going to put us back in 2 days?" I said, "I don't think so, but maybe I should ask." How did first day of 4-day per week go? And I mean, it had mixed reviews at my house, and I apologize to the teachers who were hesitant to move forward with it, because these are hard decisions, and these are hard things to do. I mean, even in my own house, it's on one hand, yay, they're back in school 4 days a week. On the other hand, wow, I really liked the small classes, Mom. So how did it go? Are we moving forward? Are we continuing this path and such?
So you're asking whether we're returning to only 2 days a week? There are no current plans to do so, no.
High school level, and how did it go? Do you feel like it went well
Yeah,
today?
I mean,
Transportation was all good?
Everything that I've heard from administrators or, just students that I engage with, right? So when I talk to the soccer players, it's not that we have a formal survey after the end of the first day back for all our students. And of course, there are a number of reasons why students enjoy school, don't enjoy school, why teachers feel hesitant, don't feel hesitant. It's, again, certainly, a point well made. It's not all the same all the time. As a school division, of course, it's tricky to say to families, yeah, in your class, students can only go 2 days a week. Who makes that decision? In what program is that done? And those are, tricky calls. And I think those are valuable conversations for the future. At this point, we simply wouldn't have that authority, for example, for next year, based on how the General Assembly has acted on schools, and that we will be required to have students in the building basically for in-person instruction for the full 180 days or 990 instructional hours. So it's not that we are given that flexibility, right? So in some areas, where a student attends a full virtual program, that's different. But unless there is direct instruction, and again, a lot of definitions still to be ironed out, the General Assembly has acted on that. And so that's not something that we anticipate doing this year. Obviously, as you said, as Chair Reed said earlier, there's a lot of pivoting, a lot of flexibility. We continue to monitor, our numbers in the community. For the last 2 weeks, we've been clearly in orange on the 2-week count that we used to evaluate on. It's now a 7-day count, but on the 2-week count, the number that everyone's familiar with, less than 200 per 100,000 population over 14 days. In December, and early January, we were at as much as 1,200. So 1166, I believe, was the highest we ever reached. We're at 140. And the rates of hospitalization, people in the community who have died of COVID, those numbers have all been arrested by the vaccine at this point. So just to give you an idea, I do use this information every single day to look at the charts, to look at the data. And if you look at just as of today, the 14-day count, as I said, is at about 140. It's 146 on the 7-day count, where it needs to be about half of that. It's 80, so it always depends on when the higher days are. On the 7-day count, you see fluctuations more often, but over the last 28 days, there has been 1 death in Rockingham County. Not that a death from COVID is anything to say, wow, that's really not a lot. But when you compare it to the previous 28 days, it was 21. So from 21 deaths to 1. And hospitalizations, it's very, very similar. There hasn't been a new hospitalization in almost a week. And so the numbers in the community, because of the vaccines, have basically arrested those outcomes that are the most serious from this disease. And there is continued support for having students in school at 3 feet distancing with required face masks, right? Those go together. And with increased ventilation, like we do with our mobile HEPA air purifiers. And so it's a combination of things. On buses, you can be closer, but only if, again, windows slightly cracked, masks are worn. And so we've looked at all this. And from a legal perspective, we are required to have students in school. So we can't say students are only coming every other day and are doing asynchronous work the rest of the time. That is simply outside what we're permitted to do by law for next year. And so that's also what we plan, to stay within for the rest of this year, unless those numbers, again, change drastically.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone, students, teachers, even parents. It's been a really hard year, and I really appreciate everybody working hard to do the best we can. And I appreciate Dr. Scheichel's team for doing the best they can. So thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Floor. Mr. Falk. Thank you. Dr. McQuilkin?
I'm going to pass this time.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Dr. Scheichel?
Just briefly, I just received an email before the school board meeting began. I just saw it from Dr. Cornegay from the Virginia Department of Health, Central Shenandoah Health District. And so families with a student aged 16 and older will likely receive an email later tonight. There will be a very specific clinic later this week at one of the local vaccination sites where students 16 and older can get vaccinated. And then, of course, 4 weeks later would be the second, or 3 weeks later, I believe, would be the second dose, because only the Pfizer vaccine is authorized for 16-year-olds, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, 18 and up. And so there are some opportunities now for at least some of our older students to be vaccinated. So I want to thank Dr. Cornegay and again, let you know that that is now the approach. Pfizer has announced that their vaccine is safe, according to their estimates, at least down to 12-year-olds. And so now trials are underway for, I believe, the younger age groups. It always goes in stages. And we're hopeful that, again, by the fall, we'll be in a much better position. And it's one of the things that has worked exceedingly well in this country compared to most other countries in the world. Israel has a higher vaccination rate and a few others, but the United States is somewhere in the top 5 there in terms of the number of people who have been fully vaccinated, especially those in the high-risk group. So good news definitely on the vaccination front. Again, we have to keep our eyes on variants and all the other things that you've heard me talk about a lot and others. But these are all good signs.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. I think the message is that's good, that there are going to be some special clinics for our older students if they want to choose to take the vaccination. And I would encourage everybody to still be vigilant. I think that's the message that Dr. Scheichel is trying to get across too. I mean, it's going to be a time where we go into celebrations and parties. The weather's getting better, and so I think vigilance to make sure that we can get through the next 6 or 8 weeks, and then that we can get into the summer season fully engaged and ready for summer school for those students that want to partake in that, and camps and other things. And so it's really important right now that we all continue to do what's required of us in our schools and to also be vigilant out in our community. So thank you.
There's really one point, if I may, that I made to my soccer players today. There's a concern about outbreaks in sports. And so researchers looked at the first division soccer games in the Netherlands, a Dutch first division, for 2 years. And they looked at how many times players are in close contact, meaning within 3 feet for 30 seconds. And it was only in 0.2% of the games that ever happened. And what I told the girls was, so we can play a certain way that even professionals play that way to limit how close you are and for how long. And of those 0.2% of the games, 50 to 80% of the time, it happened when the players all congregated around the officials complaining about a call. However, there have been outbreaks in sports and even in soccer, and the vast majority of them happen when the kids go out to eat together, when they hang out on the weekend together, when they spend too much time in the locker room together. So it's where we focus on our mitigation, the buses, the schools, where we're doing a good job. But it can get undone when we're then not paying attention with the same group of people that are not vaccinated yet in social gatherings, right? And so we do have to just be careful for a little while longer. So that's echoes exactly what you were talking about, and we do have to be careful.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Board members, we have reason to enter into closed meeting. Do we have a motion to enter in closed meeting?
I move that the board enter a closed meeting pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711A1, to discuss and consider personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individual's assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, or resignation.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any questions or discussion? Please vote. Motion carries 5-0. We're now in closed session. Many thanks to all of you for being here this evening with us. Safe travels home. Best of luck for the rest of your week. Thank you.